Hey, guys, and welcome back to the Pop Podcast. I am your host, Erin Groves, and I hope everyone had a fabulous weekend. Here we are, another Monday, and another very fabulous guest that I am so incredibly excited to have on this podcast. She is the co-founder of her own organization, the Brand Builders Group. She also is a host alongside your husband of the influential personal brand podcast. So AJ Vaden, welcome to the Pop Podcast. Tell everyone hello.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here.
I listened to your episode on another podcast, and there was really three main things that stood out to me about you and your energy. The first one was all about the personal brand, because for me personally, launching this podcast, it's been one of my biggest challenges. I think there's a lot of people out there who can resonate with, there's a lot that you can do. What is that one thing, and what is that one niche that I want to go into? The second is, I love how you talk about your faith, and you're very consistent and continuing to post about that stuff all the time on Instagram, which to me is very unique. I think a lot of people, that's on the back burner when they have a business as successful as your own. And the third is just your energy. You're overall very positive. That's everything that my podcast has to offer. So to get this started, I want you to take us back. You had a quote that when I was doing some research on you, that you just felt that you were an entrepreneur. You didn't like when people would tell you what to do. So that's kind of where I want to start, because I could not agree more with that statement. And that's something I've been told a million times over. I'm too assertive. So kind of take us back. Why entrepreneurship? Was this something that was in your family that you grew up in, or something that you knew the corporate world is not for me?
Yeah, so both. I was really blessed to be raised by entrepreneurial parents. And my grandfather, actually, when he was born in 1911, which is a really long time ago, he actually was working for a timber company. And when he was in his teenage years, he was actually the transportation for timber. So he was actually pulling logs out of the river, carrying them up the bank and putting them on trucks. And he saved up all of his money, and eventually, years later, bought out the owner of the timber company, turned it into a lumber company. And then in the 70s, my dad bought out my grandfather. And so I was raised by my mom and dad were in business together by this, entrepreneurial couple. Both of my brothers are taking over the family business now. So it's third generation. And through that process, I realized, one, that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I had no idea what that meant. But two, I know I didn't want to be in the family business. And so I set out, said, I'm going to do something completely different. I'm going to do like advertising and marketing. And so I went to school and graduated with 2 degrees and a minor, and immediately got a job because I thought I needed work experience. It's like, all right, I don't know what it means to run a business, so I need to go get a job. And I didn't last but like 6 weeks. Like I was, oh my gosh, it was so bad. And I remember it was this company called Transwestern Publishing, and they were, the supplier of Yellow Book and Yellow Pages at the time. So talking about like the most boring type of advertising that you could be doing at the time. I was selling print ads in the Yellow Pages. And I just remember going, oh, like you have to come to work every day at 8:00, and I have to be here until 5. And they had a dress code, and I got written up my second week on the job for wearing ankle pants. I got written up because it showed my ankles. Now, this was in 2015, not 1955.
I was going to say,
not that old. This was 2015. And then I had to do these ride-alongs with like these very inappropriate older men. And then I was like, this is for the birds. Like, I cannot do this. And so I quit. And my dad was like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know, but I cannot work for someone else. Like, this whole idea of telling me when to come in and telling me when I can take time off, like, I can't do this. Like, I am not employable. This is not going to work. And so I started on my entrepreneurial venture when my childhood best friend reached out to me. He knew I'd quit my job. I was working at this local boutique while I was interviewing for a bunch of like freelance stuff and trying to figure out, like, I just need enough money to pay the rent so I can figure something out. And he said, hey, I'm going to start this company. I think you should start it with me. based on all my business credentials, of course, all my experience and expertise, this was a great choice. I think really it was a willing body, desperate. It's like, whatever, what is it? And I remember his sales pitch for me to come and start this business with him. He goes, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to move to California and we're going to eat sushi every day and we can make phone calls by the pool. And I thought to myself, I could do that. Like I can make phone calls. I love sushi. I'm in. Had no idea what I was signing up for. I just said, if you can do it, surely I could figure it out. Like I've known you since we were 12. Like I got this. And that is how my entrepreneurial journey started, was with a friend who convinced me to move to California to make phone calls by the pool, which never happened, and eat sushi every day, which also did not happen. But it was enough of the enticing idea to lure me onto this journey of never turning back and really just creating my own future, regardless of how successful or how unsuccessful it was going to be.
So that first endeavor turned into, and I know you and your husband both are serial entrepreneurs. You've created multiple businesses, 7-8-figure businesses. So after that first endeavor, was that was it a failure, or was that something that was successful and kept rolling? Our naivety was the biggest blessing of our lives. So there were 4 of us in that very first company that I was a part of. And actually, we grew that company to 8 figures. And I was a part of it for 15 years, just shy of 15 years. And when we started, it was just the 4 of us. And I was 22. So it was legitimately my first job out of college. And my other 2 business partners were 23, and then a 40-year-old. So I don't know how he got roped in with us, but we were just this little group of people going, it can't be that hard if other people are figuring it out. And, this was in 2015, right? So this was right in the heart of the recession. Yeah.
And that too was ironically a huge blessing for us because we didn't know what it was like to be in business before. So this was just what it was like. And while everyone else was adjusting and panicking, we were just hustling. We were just working abnormal hours that I would not recommend today. But we were doing whatever it took to figure it out. My first year, I made $24,000 and everything I owned fit in my car. It was like, okay, can only go up from here.
Yeah.
I must get better. And I remember my second year, I made $40,000 and my dad is going, seriously, you should just come home and work for a family business. And I was like, nope, cannot, will not. I can do this on my own. And the rest is history. And we grew that to a team of over 200 individuals, 8 figures. And it was awesome. And then we left that venture. And during that, we started 3 other sub companies and we started Brand Builders Group in 2018. So 3.5 years ago. And, but so much of our entrepreneurial journey was literally by accident. It was by accident. But really more than accident, it was naivety of going, I'm going to read this book. I'm going to take this course. I'm going to hire this coach. I'm going to go to this class and I'm just going to do what they say.
I love that. And it's funny because I just did another interview and she kind of said her story was similar to yours in a sense of I just kept putting, and we talk a lot about that on this podcast of like, just keep putting yourself out there, keep talking to people, keep introducing yourself. And you never know when that next person is going to say, hey, why don't you go start this and I'll be your first customer? Or why don't you go out here and do this? And it's so funny because I think in an entrepreneur, you're taking a risk. When you're leaving the corporate world, your paycheck isn't promised. You start 24 grand up to 40 grand. And at that point, you're like, I'm just so grateful that I have something. I have a car that I can pay for. I can go buy ramen noodles. And there's so much to be appreciative. During that journey, I love to ask people, what were some of the biggest lessons that you learned during the grind and now looking back that you would advise to people? Maybe it's things not to do, or maybe it's things that you did that you're like, if you're a young entrepreneur, you're a go-getter and you're listening to this podcast, this is what you need to know.
Yeah, such a good question. I would say I probably have 3 or 4 things. Some to do, some not to do. I definitely am really proud of everything that I've done. but I put way too much worth into what I was doing versus who I was. My identity became my work. Everything I did was about the next accomplishment or hitting the next revenue benchmark or profitability or income or award or achievement. And honestly, I lost myself. It's one of those things where it's like we're getting a really beautiful opportunity to reset how we want to build our business with Brand Builders Group. Because for almost 15 years, I literally lost myself. Everything was about work. It was vacations were last, I'm last, family was last, friends were last. I missed every birthday, every wedding, every baby shower for a really long time. And 15 years later, I looked up and everyone I was friends with, I worked with. And when that company wasn't around anymore and we were gone, it was like, oh, wow, I don't have real community. I had a bunch of, work related community and that was it. And it was a very wide-eyed moment to go, who am I if I'm not this job? And I realized my identity had just become what I did, not who I was. And so if I could go back and educate my younger self, so much would be around your worth is in who you are, not what you do. It's like, who cares about what you do? It's about who you are as a person. And, I was recently interviewed for a magazine here in Nashville. They do like local entrepreneur highlights every so often. And this is kind of like a New Year's resolution of mine this year. And one of the questions was, what are some of your biggest business accomplishments? And I said, I know this is not what you're asking for, but this is what I really feel called to share is I have lots of them, but I'm not going to share any of them. Because if it's always about what I've done, it's never about who I am. And so I think I've really had to shed a whole layer of my identity being the next accomplishment, the next big win. And that has been so freeing and so healthy and so humbling at the same time of going, oh man, it's like at the end of the day, like when I die, is anyone going to care what media entity I was featured in or how much revenue I grew to companies? It's like, no, not really. And I really needed to refocus on who I was, not what I was doing at work. So I think that would be a big one, maybe the biggest one.
And I might stop you there because you jumped ahead to a few questions that I think I read that article and one of your lines, the difference between wealthy and unwealthy mindset, and your quote about time being the only thing you can't get back hit me to my core because I've been someone that is called aggressive or like is called assertive because I believe that into my core. Like you can't get anything else back. Like the time with your family, health, sickness, like there's so many things. That's why my question at the end is always, what are you grateful for? But I thought that was one thing about you that when I saw that, I was like, I'm so excited for this podcast because you are the first person that I think has ever stopped in an interview like that and not been the first to jump at everything I've done and come directly to who am I? Like, this is what I want you all to know, which I'm sure is a lot of the reason that you have the personal brand, which we're going to get into. But I just wanted to compliment you there because there's not very many people out there that would ever go that far in an interview and not capitalize on like, look how much money I've made. And you're like, who am I? Like, am I actually a good person that has genuine intentions? So,
yeah, well, I will tell you, that took a lot of soul searching and a lot of humility and humble seeking moments to get to that place. But it was because for 15 years, I really did not have a good, healthy identity. And I saw the effects that was having on myself and in my marriage and in my family of going, why do I feel it's so necessary to work 60 hours a week? And if I'm not working, then I'm not successful. And I found myself going, if I wasn't getting 100 emails a day, I was literally feeling like, do people not need me? I'm like, that is a weird feeling to have. If I don't have a full inbox, am I not needed? Am I not important? And I started noticing all these feelings of I literally couldn't relax. Like if I wasn't working, I'm like, I have to do something. Like I need to go organize something. Or I was like, that is like, man, that's a lot of years of conditioning of going, you're only worth something. You're only valuable if you're contributing to the top line or the bottom line. And I would say that was a lot of work to get to the place of, I cannot spend the next part of my life basing it on things. I won't. That's just, so it's been a real commitment of mine of like in conversations, interviews of going, I could, but I'm not going to. So I appreciate that. The second one is probably just a life value that I believe in. And I know there's lots of thoughts both ways. And I think, either way you want to go, it's your choice. But here's my opinion. We built and we'll continue to build, every business we've ever built has been debt-free. So we don't have, we've never had a business loan. Don't have one now. I think a huge part of that is going, I don't want to be indebted to anyone else. Right. And I think there's some components of that and I don't think there's anything wrong with getting loans. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But we also made some really very strict personal choices of, we're not going to get in credit card debt. We don't lease cars. It's like we bought our house with cash. We bought our cars with cash. That meant, for the first 7 years of my marriage, and with a pretty successful business, my husband and I lived in a 1,200 square foot, row house. And, our mortgage was about as much as a car payment at the time. And, when we had at that point, almost an 8-figure business and, our house was a $179,000 house. And I remember people coming over and going, this is your house? Yeah,
sure is.
And it is. And my husband was driving a Chrysler Sebring. At the time, it was a 2000 Chrysler Sebring, and this was in 2015. He had that car until my son was born, so 2017. And the air conditioning didn't work. The 2 windows didn't roll down. And we just had this conviction of, until we're going to buy the car that he wants, like this gets us from point A to point B. And I'm not going to lie, there was lots of days where I'm like, I'm not getting in this car. It is a death trap. Like, you get in it, I'm not getting in it. But it was like this just like deep core conviction of like, money's not going to control our decisions. Right. It's like, and it's like and it's like, you said, you saw the background of my house. It's like, we moved from a 1,700 square foot house that we bought to a 5,700 square foot house, our dream home that we built and architected, and we paid it with cash. But it's like, we made some really hard, inconvenient choices for a lot of years so that we would never find ourselves in the position of being leveraged or being ruled by money. And my husband and I have plenty of arguments, but I can honestly say in the 15 years we've been together, we've never, ever had an argument about money. And it was a deep shared mutual conviction of, we're going to live debt free. And money's not going to be the controlling factor of how we build our family, raise our kids, or run our business. So it's like, as much as you can, bootstrap it. Right. And there's a time for partners and investors. I'm not a particularly big fan of those, but to each their own. There's a time for everything, and you just got to feel it out, but never feel like that's the only way, because it's not true. It's just not true.
You hear that a lot, and that philosophy, I haven't taken it to the extreme with cars or houses. Granted, I haven't been in a place. I rent a house, or I rent an apartment now, but you hear a lot of people give opinions on that. And I've always thought, if I don't need to ask someone for money, I'm not going to, because I just feel like, kind of to your point, you're indebted to them and they can use that leverage against them. And if it doesn't go, you're reporting to someone, which probably kind of goes back to your previous statement of like, I didn't want someone to tell me what to do. And if I owe them money, they can tell me whatever to do, because at the end of the day, money is that one thing. And in a relationship, you hear a lot that finances are a huge argument. It's one of those huge driving factors for divorces. And when you get to a place in a relationship where you just have like, this is what we both want, it completely removes an argument that a lot of people have on a daily or weekly basis. So that's something that I admire a lot about you. And it's actually the first time that I I've ever heard that on a podcast and in an interview, which is so interesting. Was that something, do you feel that, we're going to spend a little time on that because I'm so interested about that. Do you feel that it was the way that you were raised, or was there an event in your life?
Yes, that's not how I was raised.
Okay.
Not whatsoever. That's what I'm saying. It's like to each their own. It's like everyone has to find their own path. And I think there's plenty of ways to make it work. But there was definitely a life event. My husband was raised in a very, I would say, resource lacking environment is a nice way of saying it. And I was not raised that way. I was raised by, very entrepreneurial, successful family, never wanted for anything. And he didn't. And I remember I thought having debt was no big deal, right? Like everyone has a credit card, you lease cars, you get loans, you do whatever. And he had a very different philosophy. And so we said, well, we're going to have to find a common ground here if this is like getting serious. And so when we got engaged, we both went through Financial Peace University with Dave Ramsey. And so we read
Dave Ramsey.
read the book Total Money Makeover. And we committed to each other that we were never going to have an argument about money. And so we said, before we get married, we both have to get debt free. And so no school payment, no school debt, no car payments, no credit card, because we wanted to come in to the marriage both with a clean slate. And so it was really reading that book per recommendation at church. The church was going through it. We went through it. We did the whole thing with the money and the envelopes and all the things. We did all of it, just, do what they say. And I think it was probably 12 months for him, 9 months for me. We were completely debt free. And about 6 months after that, he proposed. We got married, and we bootstrapped our wedding and got married, but we got married with no debt. And we both came to it with no baggage, no payments, no extra anything. And it was a very healthy way to start a marriage, but also a very freeing way of going, all right, everything from here on out, it's ours. Not mine. It's not yours. It's ours.
Two becomes one. And I know there's a lot of opinions out there on all this type of stuff, but I do find it interesting because when it comes to entrepreneurship, there's a lot of people that, and I had this talk with one of my coworkers who is taking out a loan, and he asked me, and I was firm on, unless I have to, I don't believe in that. If I can pay all of this out of my pocket, I'm not going to go into debt. I'm not going to run up a credit card to try to go after something that, if I can be smart and diligent and make the right choices along the way, I can come out of it debt free. So I agree with your mindset. Now, as we kind of move in bootstrapping businesses, so your business that you run now with your husband, it sounds like this was something that was brewing along with you wanting to focus on, who am I as a person? Who am I as a personal brand? And I want you to give a definition to everyone out there of what exactly is a personal brand, because that question has a lot of different answers. And I know mine is very opposite of the answer that you're probably going to give. So,
well, here's the interesting thing is starting Brand Builders Group was never planned. And a lot of people probably don't know that. Our exit from our former business was quite unexpected. And it was a clear defining point in time when we realized one of our partners was going left and we were going right. And it was like a beginning of the end type of moment. And it was a pretty sudden, unexpected exit. And we found ourselves very unprepared to exit current business and figure out how does that all work, and simultaneously get encouraged to start a new business. It wasn't planned. Doing a personal branding business wasn't a part of our agenda. None of that actually was ever even on our radar. And it was May of 2018. And we had a very sudden departure of, I was asked to step down as a founding partner of our former company due to some unshared values and beliefs, which is, everyone's got their own, and I'm very grateful for it, but it was very expedited and very sudden. And my husband resigned very quickly after that. And it was about a week after that. And a good friend of ours, fellow podcaster, Lewis Howes, reached out to us. He's amazing. And he reached out, and we were friends, but hadn't seen Lewis, hadn't talked to Lewis in a long time, maybe 2 years. And he said, "Hey, I don't know why, but I just think that you guys could help me with something I'm struggling with. And there'd be any chance that you guys have some time in the near future where I could spend some time with you." And Rory and I looked at each other and we thought, ironically, we have a lot of free time on our hands right now, and told him everything that was going on. And we said, "Hey, if you want to hop a flight, come to Nashville. Like, we got all the time you want." So he flew to Nashville, spent 2 days with us. And, although personal branding wasn't our business, that's what we had been doing for 15 years. And at the end of those 2 days, he looked at us and he goes, "Guys, this is your new business. This is what you were put on this earth to do. This is what you have to do. I just experienced it. I know people need this. I'm going to help you launch the business." And he said, "Tell me when you're ready. I'll put you on the podcast." And so 2 weeks after that, in June of 2018, he invited us out to speak to his mastermind. We sold our first 2 clients. We worked for 2 months straight on our methodologies and our philosophies, built a 1-page landing page that said, "Request a call here," and went on his podcast, launched our business. And that one podcast brought in 1,000 leads and $500,000 in business. And that's what started Brand Builders Group.
Wow. For all of you that are listening to this and not looking at the audio on YouTube, my mouth is to the floor. And first off, he's incredible. Everything he does, I've listened to his podcast. He's an incredible person. And you can tell the genuine people through a microphone from a mile away. And he is unlike any other. And I know there's a lot of people, and I don't talk a lot about a lot of the podcasts that I listen to, but he's been one. And it's funny because he's from where I'm from in Ohio. He went to a neighboring high school, and I had no idea until I think he put something on Instagram about text me, and his area code was the same as mine. And I'm like, wait, what in the world? What a small world. So anyways, we're not talking about that. Is so to all of that, it was again kind of like how I fell into entrepreneurship. And here's what I say. Hindsight 2020, I didn't fall in it. I was very luckily saying yes to some of the right paths that I really feel like God was orchestrating to prepare me to do all the things. And a big part of this too is just being willing and open to say yes. And we said yes because we felt like he's right. Like, this is what we're meant to do. This is what we've been preparing for 15 years. We just have to be willing to get out of our comfort zone and go, yeah, we're all in. And he said, "Once you're ready, I'm ready. Let me know when you're going to come on." And he did. And that's how we launched our business. So much forever indebted with gratitude to Lewis for believing in us when we didn't even know what we were going to do or what was happening. But it was really from there, because, the first 15 years, it's we had really been focused on building my husband's personal brand. And my husband's Rory Vaden, and he's awesome and he's super talented. And, we launched 2 amazing books. He's got a New York Times bestseller and a national bestseller. We had a top 100 business podcast, 8-figure coaching business, 7-figure consulting business. He's a Hall of Fame speaker, and all these things. So we had been always really focused on his personal brand. And so we'd been doing all these things behind the scenes and pulling them off, but we had never really been teaching anyone else how to do it. We'd been doing it for ourselves to grow leads and grow awareness for our company at the time. And so it wasn't really until we started Brand Builders Group, and really even in the last year, that I've even paid attention with enough time and effort to my personal brand. Because prior to that, I did most of my, business life prior to Brand Builders Group was doing corporate consulting and business coaching and keynote speaking, but always on the topic of sales. It was always about driving top line and increasing bottom line. Right? It was very corporate, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I was very tired of that. Of going there's more, there has to be more to this business life than just growing revenues and increasing bottom line. And so about a year ago,
I started doing what we actually do for our clients. I took our own advice. I put myself through our own curriculum and really started to get clear on that. And that's about the time that I started leading our company's national research study. And so we hired a third-party firm, the Center for Generational Kinetics, to go out and field this national research study on the state and trends of personal branding, because we had a whole bunch of ideas and we wanted to know now, like, if we're going to go all in, like really all in, double down on this, like, where's this heading? What's the general feel of the population? And it was through that own research that I really got convicted that I've been doing it all friggin' wrong. Like, I spent all my time behind the computer, building the business, running our financials, doing things I love. And I feel like I'm very talented at, but our study came back and actually like slapped me in the face a few times of going, you need to drink your own Kool-Aid. Because like Americans across the country are saying, like 82% of Americans say that a company is more influential in their purchase decisions if the founder or executives have a public-facing established personal brand. 82%. It was the largest statistic out of the entire study of going, literally, what it's saying is people don't trust companies, people trust people. And although innately, I already knew that, everything we were doing was building the business's brand. And it wasn't building the brands of the faces of the people leading the business. So it was our own study. I had to literally have it with like straight facts to really propel me into, I need to start talking about my own personal brand and my own message and my own values, because that, quite honestly, is what people are asking for, not what products and services do you offer. It's not what you do, it's who you are that people want to know.
I believe it's because it's how you relate to people. The things that stuck out to me the most, and some of the things that I initially listed at the beginning, were parts of those characteristics that are just who you are as a person and the things you stand for. The CEO of Spanx, she has such a big personal brand. I would say I knew her before I even knew about her brand. And I love Spanx.
Totally.
I'm wearing them right now, but Sarah Blakely has done such a good job at just creating herself and putting on such a good persona that I liked her, and that's why I bought the pants. And they're great. But had it been vice versa, I don't necessarily know if I would have bought into it. So I do love, and I want you to give the audience, A, give your definition of what a personal brand is, and then B, give us a little bit more about some of the findings that when I first heard on the episode you did, I was like flabbergasted at some of the things that people came back with.
Yeah, we were too. So our company's definition of a personal brand is that a personal brand is the digitization and the monetization of your reputation. And I think there's a huge misconception out there that a personal brand is for an influencer or a celebrity or someone who's already established. And that's not true. Really, you already have a personal brand. It's your reputation. The difference is that a personal brand is the intentional, proactive approach at actually building your reputation, whereas a reputation is more of that reactive default approach of going, I'm going to let people assume or put together what they think of me versus going, no, I'm going to make a stance for this is what I want to be known for. And that's a personal brand. So it's just that effort and intention of actually turning your personal brand into something that helps you generate awareness, marketability, credibility, and money. That's a part of it too. Now, Americans, through the study, actually said something a little different, which I think was also fascinating. And Americans said that a personal brand to them is simply someone that is recognizable. That's it. It's
Very
just
generic.
someone who is recognizable. And then you think about it, it's like, well, of course, it's like whoever I can correlate to something, they have a personal brand. And I use this example all the time. And, you know, it's like I've spent months with this data. So it's like finally sinking in. So there's a couple of things that I think are really unique in this of going, if I want to go to a trendy new restaurant here in Nashville where I live, I don't Google. I don't go to Instagram. I don't go to YouTube. I don't go to Facebook. Like, what do is I text my bougiest foodie friend who's nitpicky and snobby and who's up in the mix. And I ask, where should I go? Because I know that she's going to know. And it's, although she may not run a business in that, she's got a personal brand that is correlated to, I'm into food. I'm a foodie. Same thing. If I want tax advice, if I want tax tips, I know what friend to go to. Mm-hmm. Right. It's like, even though that's not their business, I know that this is what they love. They're passionate about it. They're always telling people things that they're doing. So they have personal brands to me because that's what I recognize in them. And I thought that was really powerful, of going, neither of them are intentionally doing that, but that is how I connect them. That is how I correlate who they are to something that is already connected, of something that I go to them for. And I think the really important piece of that for anyone in business today is also going, well, if you're not proactively building it, then what are people reactively assuming? And I think that's where this whole notion of building your reputation, building your personal brand has become no longer a suggestion. It's a requirement. This study says that 74%, 3/4 of Americans say they are more likely to trust you if you have an established personal brand. That is overwhelming in one respect. And then it should be like, well, duh, in the other, because it's like, well, of course, if I know you, I'm more likely to trust you. The difference is, how are you being seen? How are you letting people get to know you? That's how it's changed. That's social media. That's the internet, right? That's YouTube. And I think, to me, some of the biggest things of why this is so relevant in business today is that, personal branding, one, it is the future of marketing, right? Gen Z, who was a huge part of this study, says that, personal branding is no longer a thing of vanity or popularity. It is a critical and essential part of how they do business. And, the part that I thought was fascinating in this whole study is that millennials, people aged 26 to 44, were in every single data point, the majority of all the generations who go, having a personal brand is highly impactful and influential in who I trust, who I buy from, who I recommend, who I promote, who I work for. It was across the board in every category. But personal branding it's the new word for reputation, i.e. trust, right? That's not new, but it's a new way of doing it.
Yeah. Which I love that, because you always hear, I just said I love that again, people buy from people that they like. And as someone that's in sales, you hear it time and time and time again. And I've even had customers that, and one of the clients I just brought over was like, we literally bought because we liked you. Like, we obviously really like your software and you could do the business thing that we needed to accomplish, but it was because you were actually a human being and you were real and you weren't trying to push something that wasn't relevant. So I just find it, especially over the last, 3 to 5 years with influencer marketing just skyrocketing, it's people continue to buy from these influencers that they trust, that put their lives out there, that are relatable, that have kids like you do, that are trying to get something, it's all the things that we all experience every single day. And we're just adding the human behavior in that and taking out the pressure of being perfect or you have to be this certain way. What do you think is the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to their personal brand?
They think that a personal brand is becoming known. That's the biggest mistake. They think that a personal brand is about building a social media following, throwing up a website, building a course, and just doing all the components. And here's what I'd say. It's like, those are pieces of a personal brand. That is not your personal brand. A personal brand is a true flushing out, in our opinion, of what problem do you solve for the world, right? Like, what problem do you feel like you were put on this earth to help people overcome, right? And then what is your message? What is your unique superpower and how you help people overcome that problem? What group of people do you want to solve it for? And then how do you make money solving it? And there's a science to it. And then there's an art to it. And the art of it is, a personal brand is about who you are. all the other stuff is what you do, right? It's like there are pieces of, yes, there is a way to work the algorithm. And yes, there's SEO and paid traffic and a website and courses and funnels and dashboards and metrics and analytics. Yes, those are all parts of it. That is not what a personal brand is. And I fully believe, like to my core, 100% conviction that every single person on the planet, like if you believe your reputation is important, then you should spend time crafting it. Right. And I think that's the piece that people miss. And they associate a personal brand with social media. Mm-hmm. Like people all the time, when they hear that, we're in personal branding, they're like, oh, can you give me some social media tips? And I'm like, not really. I don't have a huge following. Like, I don't know if you want advice from me there. It's like, I think I have like 10,000 followers on my Instagram. And one of my great friends, John Rulin, and I'm totally stealing this from him, but I'll give him credit. And he says, you don't have to have millions of followers to make millions of dollars. And it's like, you don't need millions of followers to make a great business and to impact a huge amount of lives. Like, I don't need that. And I think that to me is like social media gets a bad rap, right? I think it's how we use it, mm-hmm. right? You say that about money, alcohol, drugs, guns, whatever. It's how we use it. And you can use it for good. You can use it for business, and it can also be very, very bad and dangerous. But people tie up, well, I'm only going to be successful if I have all this engagement. False. I'm only going to be successful if false. None of that is true. And I think they associate engagement and followership and subscribers and downloads and book purchases and speaking fees to that's a personal brand. And it's not. Those are the business model components of a personal brand. And I think people lose sight of, if you really want to make a difference, like a real difference, and you really want to do good, like it comes from a place of mission. Like mission before money. Like I'm all about making money. Like I know that's a necessary part of living, but I also believe strongly that if it's focused on the mission, if it's focused on doing good, money will always come. It will always be there because you're doing good work for good people and they will tell people. And it's sometimes really hard to find really good service providers. So if you're really good at what you do, people will talk. And they will share and it will grow, maybe not at the rate you want it to always, but eventually it will always catch up to you being like truly trustworthy and having integrity and doing good and doing right and providing great service. And I think people, they confuse that. They get lost in, it's about being known. It's about social media. So I think that's the biggest mistake that people make. That was a very long answer, but I think that's the biggest mistake.
A lot of people, and I've seen this mistake made over and over again, and I actually just had this conversation with one of my mentors of no matter how big I get or no matter what happens in my life, one of my biggest fears, I never wanted to lose myself because you can spend an entire life and building a reputation and you make one wrong decision and that entire reputation is gone. And I have seen, and my dad, I admire him a lot because he is someone that says no to a lot of things and has turned down business opportunities because they don't align with his values and they don't align with where he's at. And I think that's why he was so successful because he never, ever, ever wavered on what he truly believed and his faith and his values and his family. And he'll tell you, I've seen so many people get to the top because that's what they wanted and they crumble faster than a cookie crumbles because they made wrong choices. And it's so true. And my thing too, and this is a question for you, is as people grow and evolve and as people start to gain, whether it's money or status, whatever that thing is, as they're building their personal brand, what do you give advice to people that it's a constant evolution? You're always growing, you're always changing. So a personal brand isn't static, it's constantly evolving. And how do you coach people on, you were here 2 years ago and now you're completely different, but that's okay?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question, but I also think there's a through line through people's personal brand. So although things change and evolve, and since we both have a common contact, Lewis Howes, I'll use him for example, right? So if you just look at the course of Lewis's career, right, he really started with LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn strategy and training and doing online digital, tips and tricks. And you may feel like that's really disconnected to who he is and what he's doing today, but it's not. Right? It's like a huge part of that has taught him how to build his platform. He may not teach that anymore, but that's where he got started in learning the infrastructure. And then it went to the podcast, right? And then it's the School of Greatness podcast. And then the book came out, and then you've got the Mask of Masculinity. And you're like, well, what's the correlation in there? And there is a correlation. And the problem that Lewis solves is self-doubt. Right? That is the problem that he solves. And it happens in the School of Greatness, and it was happening on the LinkedIn component, and it happened in the Mask of Masculinity. It's like there was a through line through all of these different things that may not be so super apparent if you look at things at a very high level. Mm-hmm. But when you get down to the chapters, the messages, the interviews, just even knowing that, like, yeah, he really does talk about overcoming and conquering self-doubt, how to believe in yourself, how to accomplish great things, like how to find the greatness within you. That's all about overcoming self-doubt. And so I think for everyone, there is this natural through line of, I feel so inspired and convicted to talk about this problem because it was my problem. Right. And it's like that doesn't change. But maybe the way we talk about it changes, the medium changes, the format changes, the audience changes. And it makes it look like everything has changed. But I think a good analogy of it would be an egg. And I know it's going to sound so crazy, right? That an egg comes in a lot of different, I've never used this analogy before. It just came in my mind. An egg comes in a lot of different forms, right? It comes in its, original form in a shell with liquid yolk, right? And you can hard boil it, right? You can scramble it, right? You can do all these different things with it. You can peel it, you can leave it whole, but at the end of the day, it's an egg.
Yeah.
It looks like a lot of different things, but it's an egg. And I think that is how our personal brands are. They just look different on the surface. At the end of the day, there's always this common through line that this is undercurrent. It just maybe isn't apparent. And so what we coach people on, and what I would coach people on, is you will change. Right? Your products will change. Your services will change. Your audience will change. Right? My audience is very different today than it was 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I was like only talking to corporate execs, VP of sales, presidents, CEOs. Today, it's like I could be talking to a mommy blogger, a New York Times bestselling author, or the owner of a commercial dooring company, all clients. It looks very, very different, but with very common things, which is I have a message that I feel called to share with the world. So very different, but also very common.
And you always hear that people change. And I do believe that people do change and you grow. But I feel as at your core, there's always that thing inside of you that's burning. It's when do you capitalize it? And your point, what is the messaging? And it has a lot to do with technology and how times are changing. But that's something that I think about personally because I've struggled with what exactly is that mission? What exactly is that one thing that I'm very passionate about a lot of things? And it's hard, but it's a lot more simple. Do you feel that a lot of your clients overthink and put a huge emphasis on it has to be this grand idea and it's usually plain as day?
Every single one, including myself. Like we want it to sound marketing. We want it to sound sexy. We want it to be unique and trendy. And we want it to like rhyme and have all these cool features to it. And it's like, that's not what we do. It's like often, I'll use a great example. It's like people always want the problem they solve to be unique from someone else. It's like somebody literally said this to me in one of our events one day. They're like, well, the problem I solve can't be shame. That's what Brene Brown solves. And I just sat there and I'm like, you do know there's like 8 billion people on the planet Earth, right? Like there's going to be some shared problems. And they were like, yeah, but she's already so known for that. And I just said, to her audience, but your audience is different than hers. You are different than her, different life experiences, different personality, different viewpoints. And so I think a lot of people they think they can't claim something if it already exists. Y'all, everything already exists, right?
Yeah.
We are only recreating, not creating. And then I think other people, they're like, well, it can't just be self-doubt. That's too boring. I need to make it different. Like I need to make it about, something trendier. I'm like, no, that's confusing. Nobody knows that word. Where did you find that? Thesaurus? Like, no, it needs to be clear, not sexy. I need to understand it, not have to look it up in a dictionary.
Again, I'm going to say I love that. Everyone out there listening is probably like, Erin, stop saying I love that. And I am saying this because I personally go through this all the time. And it's talking with people like you that do this for a living that I'm like, okay, I have more assurance that I'm not the only person out there that is trying to come up with a personal brand and I'm overthinking everything. So I think it's a good takeaway. And we're beginning to wrap up this podcast. So first off, I just want to say thank you for your time and thank you for coming on. This was a lot of good knowledge and something that I think is very unique. And I end every podcast with one simple question, and that is, what are you grateful for today, AJ?
Yes, and I love this question. So if you're not going to say I love it, I'll say it. Soft turns. Honestly, I'm grateful for today. I am grateful for today. One of my themes for this year is to be present in the moment. And I'm just grateful for today. It's going to have problems. It's going to have good things. It's going to have screaming kids in the background. It's going to have victories. It's going to have failures. But I'm just really grateful for today.
Thank you so much. And I am grateful for my health. I think during this time, it's easily overlooked. And it's something that, coming from being sick, I'm just very grateful for my health and, as always, for this podcast. So thank you so much, AJ, for coming on. I will put all of her info in the notes in the bio of where you can find her, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.